The champagne glass slipped from Angel Wesley's trembling fingers, shattering against the yacht's polished deck as she spotted him again. The man in the black overcoat and fedora hat, standing at the edge of the marina, watching her through those dark sunglasses like a predator sizing up his prey. Her heart hammered against her ribs. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of this nightmare, and he was still there, always there, no matter where she went or how carefully she tried to hide. "Please not here," she whispered, backing away from the yacht's railing. The elegant waterfront party continued around her. Wealthy guests laughing, clinking glasses, completely unaware that her world was crumbling with terror. The stalker took a step closer to the dock, his cold smile visible even from this distance. Angel's breath caught in her throat. She was trapped on this floating prison of privilege, surrounded by water with nowhere to run. That's when she saw him. A tall man in an expensive brown checkered suit, standing alone near the champagne table. Without thinking, without breathing, without any plan except pure desperation, Angel rushed toward him. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, grabbing his face with both hands. "Please just go with this." And then she kissed him. Hard, passionate, like her life depended on it. Because maybe it did. The stranger's lips were warm, surprised, but after a moment of shock, he kissed her back with an intensity that made her forget everything. The fear, the stalker, even her own name. When they finally broke apart, she was breathless for entirely different reasons. "Well," the man said, his voice deep and amused, "that's certainly one way to introduce yourself." Angel glanced back toward the marina. The stalker was gone, vanished like smoke. Relief flooded through her so powerfully she nearly collapsed. She had no idea she'd just kissed Steven Jameson, the billionaire CEO whose face graced magazine covers and whose business empire controlled half the city. She had no idea this desperate act would change everything. What happened next, no one saw coming. What would you do if you were being stalked and felt completely helpless? Drop a comment and let me know what your move will be. 2 hours earlier, Angel Wesley had been living what most people would call an ordinary Tuesday. She worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm downtown, the kind of place where the coffee was always cold and the deadlines were always impossible. But she loved it. Loved creating something beautiful from nothing. Loved the quiet satisfaction of a design that just worked. Angel had always been the type to blend into crowds. At 26, she was pretty in an understated way. With natural hair she kept in protective braids and a smile that could light up a room when she wasn't looking over her shoulder in fear. She lived in a modest apartment in Brooklyn, took the subway to work, and her biggest luxury was the occasional latte from the coffee shop on the corner. She'd never asked for attention, never wanted to stand out. But 3 weeks ago, everything changed. It started with flowers. Beautiful white roses left outside her apartment door with no note, no signature. She'd thought they were a mistake, meant for someone else. Then came the letters, typed, never handwritten, telling her how special she was, how he'd been watching her, how they were meant to be together. The man in the black overcoat appeared a week later, always at a distance, always watching, outside her building when she left for work, across the street from her favorite lunch spot, in the back of the subway car during her evening commute. He never approached, never spoke, just watched, with those dark sunglasses and that cold, patient smile that made her skin crawl. Angel had gone to the police twice. Both times, they'd been polite but useless. Has he threatened you directly? Has he touched you? Has he tried to break into your home? No, no, and no. So there was nothing they could do except suggest she be careful and stay aware of her surroundings. as if she could be anything else. Tonight, she'd only come to this yacht party because her friend Melissa worked for the catering company and needed help serving drinks. It's good money, Angel, and it's on a boat in the middle of the harbor. He can't follow you there, right? Wrong. Somehow he'd found her again. Somehow he always found her. Meanwhile, 50 feet away, Steven Jameson had been having the worst evening of his 32 years. The yacht party was supposed to be a celebration. His company had just closed a deal worth $200 million. But instead of celebrating, he was trapped in conversations with people who only saw dollar signs when they looked at him. Steven wasn't like the other billionaires. He built his empire from nothing, starting with a single food truck and turning it into a restaurant chain that now spanned 3 states. He still remembered what it felt like to count every penny, to work 18-hour days, to fall asleep on his office couch because he couldn't afford both rent and business expenses. Success had brought him everything he'd thought he wanted: money, power, respect. But it had also brought him isolation. Every smile felt calculated. Every conversation felt like a transaction. Every woman who approached him seemed more interested in his bank account than his heart. He'd been standing alone, watching the city lights reflect on the water, when this beautiful woman with desperate eyes had grabbed his face and kissed him like the world was ending. And for the first time in years, Steven Jameson felt truly alive. Have you ever felt completely alone even when surrounded by people? I'd love to hear what it felt like being in that situation. I'm sorry, Angel whispered, stepping back from Steven, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. I shouldn't have. That was completely inappropriate. Hey, it's okay, Steven said gently, but before he could say more, a sharp voice cut through the evening air. Angel Wesley. Angel's blood turned to ice. She knew that voice. Turning slowly, she saw Detective Morrison from the precinct, dressed in an expensive suit that definitely wasn't bought on a cop's salary. He was walking toward them with a smug expression that made her stomach drop. Well, look who decided to crash the party, Morrison said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Shouldn't you be at home, staying out of trouble? Steven frowned. Is there a problem here? Morrison's eyes lit up with malicious pleasure. Oh, you don't know who you just kissed, do you, Mr. Jameson? This is Angel Wesley. She's been filing false police reports, claiming someone's stalking her. Classic attention-seeking behavior. That's not true, Angel said, her voice barely above a whisper. But the damage was already being done. Guests were turning to stare, their expressions shifting from curiosity to judgment. 3 times she's come to the station, Morrison continued, clearly enjoying himself. 3 times we've told her there's no evidence of any stalker. But she keeps insisting, keeps wasting our time with her fantasies. A woman in diamonds leaned toward her companion. How did someone like that even get on this yacht? Probably working, another guest whispered. The help these days, they have no boundaries. Angel felt the familiar sting of being reduced to nothing, of being dismissed before anyone even knew her name. She'd experienced it her whole life. In fancy stores where security followed her, in job interviews where she had to work twice as hard to prove herself, in moments like this where her word meant nothing against a man in uniform. I'm not lying, she said, louder this time, but her voice shook. He's real. He's been following me for weeks. He was just here, watching from the marina. Where? Morrison challenged, gesturing toward the empty dock. I don't see anyone. Do you see anyone, Mr. Jameson? Steven looked toward the marina, then back at Angel. She could see the doubt creeping into his eyes, and it felt like a knife twisting in her chest. Look, miss, Steven said carefully. Maybe you should. Maybe I should what? Angel's voice cracked. Go home and pretend I'm not terrified to sleep in my own bed? Pretend I don't check my locks 5 times every night? Pretend I don't take different routes to work because I'm scared he'll be waiting for me? The crowd was growing larger now, drawn by the drama. Angel could feel their stares like physical weight, their whispered judgments cutting deeper than any blade. She's clearly unstable, Morrison said to Steven, as if Angel wasn't standing right there. I'd be careful if I were you. Women like this, they latch onto successful men, create drama to get attention. Women like what? Angel snapped, finally finding her fire. Women like me? Black women. Poor women. Women who don't belong at your fancy parties. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the ocean seemed to hold its breath. Morrison's smile turned cruel. I was going to say delusional women, but if that's how you want to play it. Angel felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these people who had already decided she was nothing. Steven stood frozen between them, his face unreadable. The man who had kissed her back with such passion just minutes ago now looked at her like she was a stranger, like she was a problem to be solved. I think you should leave, Morrison said quietly, before this gets any more embarrassing for everyone involved. Have you ever been in a situation where no one believed you, even when you were telling the truth? Share your experience in the comments. Sometimes we all need to know we're not alone. Angel was about to turn and walk away, to disappear into the night like she always did when the world became too much, when she heard it. A small, frightened whimper coming from behind the yacht's main cabin. Everyone else was too busy staring at her humiliation to notice, but Angel's ears had been trained by weeks of hypervigilance to catch every sound, every movement that might signal danger. She found the little girl crouched behind a life preserver, maybe 6 years old, with tears streaming down her face and her small body shaking violently. Hey, sweetheart, Angel said softly, immediately dropping to her knees. All the anger and embarrassment for moments before melted away. What's wrong? I can't breathe. The girl gasped between sobs. My chest, it hurts. Angel recognized the signs immediately. Panic attack. She'd had enough of them herself over the past 3 weeks to know exactly what this little girl was experiencing. Okay, baby, I'm going to help you, Angel said, her voice calm and steady. What's your name? Sophie, the girl whispered. Sophie, that's a beautiful name. I'm Angel. Can you look at me, Sophie? The little girl's eyes were wide with terror, but she managed to focus on Angel's face. Good girl. Now, I want you to breathe with me, okay? We're going to pretend we're blowing up a big balloon. Ready? Angel demonstrated, taking a slow, deep breath in through her nose, then releasing it slowly through pursed lips. In through your nose, and out like you're blowing up the biggest, most beautiful balloon in the world. Sophie tried to copy her breathing still ragged but beginning to slow. That's perfect, Sophie. You're so brave. Now, can you tell me 5 things you can see right here? The life preserver, Sophie managed. Good. What else? Your pretty earrings. For more, sweetheart. As Sophie continued the grounding exercise Angel had learned from her own therapist, a crowd began to gather. But this time, they weren't staring at Angel with judgment. They were watching in amazement as she worked magic with this terrified child. Where did you learn to do that? Steven asked quietly, having appeared beside them. Experience, Angel said simply, never taking her eyes off Sophie. Sometimes the people who've been through the darkness are the best at helping others find the light. A woman in an elegant dress pushed through the crowd. Sophie, "Oh my God, Sophie, where have you been?" "Mommy." Sophie reached for her mother, but her breathing was still uneven. "She had a panic attack," Angel explained gently. "She's okay now, but she might need a few more minutes to fully calm down." The woman, clearly one of the wealthy guests, looked at Angel with surprise. You helped her? How did you know what to do?" "I work with kids sometimes," Angel said, which wasn't entirely true, but she had volunteered at a community center back when she felt safe enough to have a regular schedule. "Panic attacks are more common than people think, especially in children. The doctors have been trying to help her with anxiety for months," the woman said, tears in her own eyes. "But nothing's worked as well as what you just did." Detective Morrison, who had been watching from the edge of the crowd, stepped forward with a sneer. "Don't be fooled. She's probably the one who scared the kid in the first place. People like her. People like her just saved my daughter," Sophie's mother snapped, her voice sharp as a blade. "While you were standing there doing nothing." Steven was staring at Angel with new eyes. This woman who had been dismissed as delusional, who had been humiliated in front of everyone, had just demonstrated more grace and skill than anyone else at this party. "Sophie," Angel said softly, "you're going to be just fine. But I want you to remember something, okay? When you feel scared, you can always do our balloon breathing. And you know what else?" "What?" Sophie whispered. "You're braver than you think you are. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who feel scared but keep going anyway." Sophie nodded solemnly, then surprised everyone by wrapping her small arms around Angel's neck. "Thank you, Angel," she whispered. "You made the scary feeling go away." As Angel hugged the little girl back, she caught Steven's eye over Sophie's shoulder. For the first time since this nightmare began, she saw something in a man's gaze that wasn't judgment or dismissal. She saw respect. The atmosphere on the yacht had completely changed. Where moments before there had been whispers and judgment, now there was an uncomfortable silence as the wealthy guests processed what they'd just witnessed. Sophie's mother, who Angel now realized was wearing jewelry worth more than Angel's annual salary, knelt down beside them. "I'm Steven Jameson," she said, extending her hand, "and I owe you an enormous debt of gratitude." Angel's eyes widened. "Jameson? Steven's my brother," Catherine said, glancing toward the man who had been watching Angel with growing fascination. "Sophie is his niece." Steven stepped forward, his entire demeanor transformed. "Angel, I owe you an apology. A massive one." Detective Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "Now wait a minute, Mr. Jameson. Don't let one good deed fool you. This woman has been—" "This woman," Steven interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to commanding boardrooms, "just demonstrated more skill and compassion in 5 minutes than I've seen from anyone in months. Including you, Detective." Morrison's face flushed red. "Sir, with all due respect, you don't understand the situation." "I understand perfectly," Steven said, his tone growing colder. "I understand that a woman came to you for help, and instead of investigating her claims, you dismissed her. I understand that when she was being humiliated tonight, you participated in that humiliation. And I understand that while you were busy making assumptions, she was saving my niece from a panic attack that could have sent her to the hospital." Angel watched in amazement as the power dynamic shifted before her eyes. The same people who had been whispering about her minutes ago were now looking at Detective Morrison with disgust. "Furthermore," Steven continued, pulling out his phone, "I'm very curious about something. Angel, you said your stalker was here tonight, watching from the marina." Angel nodded, her heart beginning to race again. "Security," Steven called out. Within seconds, two men in black suits appeared. I want you to pull all the marina security footage from the past 2 hours. Look for a man in a black overcoat and fedora hat. Right away, Mr. Jameson, one of them said, speaking into his radio. Morrison's confident smirk began to falter. That's not necessary. There's no evidence. There's about to be, Steven said firmly. And Detective Morrison? I'm also going to be making some calls to your superiors tomorrow. I'm very interested in discussing your approach to investigating stalking cases, especially when they involve women of color. The crowd murmured their approval. Angel felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks, the sensation of being believed, of being protected. Catherine stood up, still holding Sophie's hand. Angel, I don't know how to thank you. Sophie's been struggling with anxiety since her father and I divorced, and the doctors haven't been able to help her the way you just did. It's nothing, Angel said softly, but Catherine shook her head. It's everything. You saw a child in pain and you helped her, even after being treated terribly by people who should have known better. Catherine's voice grew stronger. I run a children's anxiety foundation. We've been looking for someone with your skills to head our new community outreach program. Angel's mouth fell open. What? The position pays 6 figures, Catherine continued. Full benefits, flexible schedule, and the chance to help hundreds of children like Sophie. Steven's security team leader approached them. Mr. Jameson? We found him. Everyone turned as the man held up a tablet showing grainy security footage. There, clear as day, was the figure in the black overcoat and fedora hat, standing exactly where Angel had said he was, watching the yacht with binoculars. The silence that followed was deafening. Detective Morrison's face had gone pale. That could be anyone. Run facial recognition, Steven ordered. I want to know who this man is within the hour. Angel felt her knees go weak with relief. After weeks of being told she was crazy, of being dismissed and doubted, here was proof. Undeniable, recorded proof that she had been telling the truth all along. Steven turned to her, his eyes filled with something that looked like admiration. Angel, I am so sorry. For doubting you, for not standing up for you sooner, for letting you face this alone. You didn't know, she whispered, tears finally spilling over. That's no excuse, he said firmly. You deserve to be believed. You deserve to be protected. And from now on you will be. The guests who had been whispering about her earlier now looked ashamed, avoiding eye contact. Detective Morrison was backing toward the yacht's exit, clearly wanting to escape before things got worse for him. But Angel barely noticed any of them. For the first time in 3 weeks, she felt safe. More than safe, she felt seen, valued, respected. She felt like she mattered. 20 minutes later, Steven's security team had worked their magic. The tablet now displayed a full profile. Marcus Webb, 34, unemployed, with a history of stalking charges that had been mysteriously dropped or reduced over the years. He's been arrested twice before for similar behavior, the security chief reported. Both cases were handled by Detective Morrison's precinct. Both were dismissed due to lack of evidence. The crowd gasped. Detective Morrison, who had been trying to slip away unnoticed, froze near the yacht's gangway. Steven's voice cut through the night air like a blade. Detective Morrison, I think you have some explaining to do. All eyes turned to the detective, whose face had gone from pale to ashen. There must be some mistake. The only mistake, Steven said, stepping forward with the commanding presence that had built his empire, was trusting you to do your job. Angel, would you like to tell everyone what Detective Morrison said to you when you reported your stalker? Angel's voice was stronger now, backed by proof and surrounded by people who finally believed her. He said I was attention-seeking, that women like me make false reports to get sympathy. He said I was wasting police time with my fantasies. The crowd's murmur turned angry. These were influential people, the kind who donated to police charities and sat on city boards. Their disapproval carried weight. Catherine stepped forward, her voice ringing with authority. Detective Morrison, as someone who sits on the police oversight committee, I'm very interested in your pattern of dismissing stalking cases. How many other women have you failed? This is ridiculous, Morrison blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. You can't judge my entire career based on one. One what? Steven interrupted. One woman whose life you put in danger? One case where you were so busy making assumptions that you ignored evidence? One time where your prejudice nearly cost someone everything. Angel watched in amazement as the man who had humiliated her just an hour ago crumbled before her eyes. The same guests who had whispered about her were now looking at Morrison with disgust and contempt. Furthermore, Steven continued, pulling out his phone, I'm calling the police commissioner right now. I think he needs to know that one of his detectives has been dismissing stalking cases and harassing victims at private events. Wait, Morrison said desperately. You don't understand the pressure we're under, the number of false reports. False reports. Angel's voice rose, and for the first time in weeks, it was filled with power instead of fear. You mean reports from women you decided weren't worth believing? Reports from people who don't look like your idea of a real victim? The crowd was fully on Angel's side now. She could see it in their faces. Shame for how they'd treated her, anger at Morrison's behavior, respect for her strength. Steven finished his call and turned back to the group. The commissioner is sending internal affairs to meet Detective Morrison at the precinct. Tonight. Morrison's career was over and everyone knew it. But Steven wasn't finished. He turned to address the entire crowd, his voice carrying across the yacht. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we witnessed something important. We saw how quickly we can judge someone, how easily we can dismiss their pain, how readily we can believe the worst about people we don't understand. The guests shifted uncomfortably, recognizing themselves in his words. But we also saw something else, Steven continued, his eyes finding Angel's. We saw courage. We saw compassion. We saw a woman who, even while being humiliated and dismissed, stopped everything to help a frightened child. We saw someone who has been terrorized for weeks still find the strength to be kind. Angel felt tears streaming down her face, but they were different tears now. Tears of relief, of vindication, of hope. Angel Wesley, Steven said, stepping toward her. You are the strongest person I have ever met. You faced your fears, you stood up for yourself, and you showed all of us what real character looks like. The crowd began to applaud. Slowly at first, then building to thunderous approval. The same people who had whispered about her were now cheering for her. Catherine stepped forward with Sophie, who was holding a bouquet of roses from the yacht's decorations. These are for you, Sophie said shyly. Because you're my hero. Angel knelt down to accept the flowers, hugging the little girl who had changed everything. You're my hero too, sweetheart. You were so brave tonight. As she stood up, Angel found herself face to face with Steven, the man she had kissed in desperation, who had doubted her, who had then fought for her. I have a confession, he said softly, so only she could hear. When you kissed me tonight, it wasn't just to escape your stalker. It was the first real moment I've had in years. The first time someone saw me as just me. Angel smiled through her tears. And when you believed me, when you fought for me, it was the first time in weeks I felt like I mattered. You do matter, Steven said firmly. You matter more than you know. The yacht erupted in cheers as Steven leaned down and kissed her again. But this time, it wasn't born of desperation or fear. It was born of respect, admiration, and the beginning of something beautiful. Detective Morrison slunk away into the night, his career and reputation in ruins. The stalker would be arrested within hours, thanks to the evidence Steven's team had gathered. But Angel barely noticed any of that. For the first time in 3 weeks, she felt safe. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. What's the most powerful moment of justice or vindication you've ever witnessed? Sometimes the truth takes time to surface, but when it does, it changes everything. Share your experience with us. 6 months later, Angel stood in the bright, cheerful offices of the Jameson Children's Anxiety Foundation, watching as a group of kids practiced the same breathing techniques she'd taught Sophie that night on the yacht. Her office walls were covered with drawings from the children she'd helped. Colorful pictures of balloons, rainbows, and smiling faces with "Thank you, Miss Angel" written in crayon. The community outreach program had exceeded everyone's expectations. Angel had trained dozens of teachers, counselors, and parents in anxiety management techniques. She'd spoken at conferences, written articles, and most importantly, she'd helped hundreds of children find their way through the darkness of fear. Her phone buzzed with a text from Steven. "Dinner tonight? I have something important to ask you." Angel smiled, her heart fluttering the same way it had that first night. Their relationship had grown slowly, built on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. Steven had kept his promise. She was protected, valued, and cherished. But more than that, she had found her own strength, her own voice, her own worth. Detective Morrison had been fired and was facing criminal charges for misconduct. The investigation had uncovered a pattern of dismissed cases, particularly involving women of color and victims from lower-income backgrounds. His actions had led to a complete overhaul of how stalking cases were handled in the city. Marcus Webb, her stalker, was serving 2 years in prison. The evidence Steven's team had gathered revealed he'd been stalking women for over a decade, with Morrison's help in covering it up. Angel had testified at his trial with Steven by her side, her voice strong and clear as she told her story. But perhaps the most beautiful change was in Sophie. The little girl who had been crippled by anxiety was now thriving, using the techniques Angel had taught her to manage her fears. She visited the foundation every week, often bringing other children who needed help. "Miss Angel," Sophie called out now, running into her office with a huge smile. "Look what I made." She held up a drawing of 2 women, one tall with braids, one small with pigtails, standing together under a rainbow. At the bottom, in careful letters, she'd written, "Heroes help heroes." "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Angel said, kneeling down to hug her. "What does it mean?" "It means you helped me when I was scared, and now I can help other kids when they're scared too. We're both heroes." Angel felt tears prick her eyes. This child, who had been so frightened that night, was now confident enough to see herself as someone who could help others. Catherine appeared in the doorway, beaming with pride. "Sophie insisted on coming to see you before her therapy session. She wanted to show you her latest artwork." "I love it," Angel said sincerely. "Sophie, you know what this reminds me of? That night on the boat, when you were so brave even though you were scared." "You were brave too," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "Even when those mean people were saying bad things about you, you still helped me." Out of the mouths of babes. Angel had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was doing the right thing despite the fear. That evening, Steven picked her up in his car. Not a limousine or flashy sports car, but a simple sedan. He'd learned that Angel valued authenticity over extravagance, substance over show. They drove to the marina where it all began, to the same yacht where their lives had intersected in the most unexpected way. "Why here?" Angel asked as they walked onto the deck. "Because this is where I learned the most important lesson of my life," Steven said, taking her hands in his. "I learned that real strength isn't about money or power or influence. It's about character. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. It's about seeing people for who they really are, not what they appear to be." Angel's heart began to race as Steven dropped to one knee, pulling out a simple, elegant ring. "Angel Wesley, you changed my life the moment you kissed me. Not because you needed something from me, but because you showed me what real courage looks like. You taught me that the most powerful thing we can do is believe in each other, fight for each other, and lift each other up." Tears streamed down Angel's face as he continued. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you deserve to be believed, protected, and cherished?" "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes." As Steven slipped the ring onto her finger, Angel looked out at the city lights reflecting on the water. 6 months ago, she had been a woman running from her fears, dismissed and disbelieved. Tonight, she was a woman who had found her voice, her purpose, and her home. The kiss they shared was nothing like that first desperate embrace. This one was full of promise, of hope, of a future built on truth and trust. Later, as they sat together watching the stars, Angel reflected on the journey that had brought them here. "You know what I learned?" she said softly. "What's that?" "Sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to the best ones. If I hadn't been so scared that night, if I hadn't kissed a stranger in desperation, none of this would have happened. I wouldn't have found my calling, or helped all those children, or met you." Steven squeezed her hand. "And I learned that real love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone real. Someone brave enough to be vulnerable, strong enough to ask for help, and kind enough to help others even when they're hurting." Angel smiled, thinking of all the children she'd helped, all the families she'd supported, all the lives that had been changed because she'd refused to stay silent. "That night, I thought I was just trying to escape," she said. "I had no idea I was running toward everything I'd ever wanted." As they sat together under the stars, Angel realized that her story wasn't really about escaping a stalker or kissing a billionaire. It was about finding the courage to believe in herself, to demand the respect she deserved, and to use her pain to help others heal. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the bravest acts of desperation. Sometimes the people who seem the most broken are actually the strongest. And sometimes when you're running from your fears, you're actually running toward your destiny. Angel Wesley had learned that she was worth believing, worth protecting, and worth loving. And that knowledge had changed not just her life, but the lives of everyone she touched. The scared woman who had kissed a stranger to escape her stalker was gone. In her place stood a confident, powerful woman who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to claim it. And that, she realized, was the greatest transformation of all.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.